or good afternoon or good evening to everybody, depending on where you're joining from. It is morning here in Redmond, where we are at the Hive as usual with my colleagues David Boyle and Sam Albert. And I want to set things up with just a basic framework for today about how we're going to talk about AI. There's been a lot of conversation about it. It's understandably a little bit confusing, and I want to break the content that we're going to talk about today into these three categories that you see on the slide here. And those are device AI, platform AI, and Microsoft 365 Copilot. And I want to distinguish between these three because it's important to understand when we talk about intelligence, artificial intelligence in general, this is a good framework to look at it. You have the device AI that's really where the compute is being done in the device itself. And it provides some basic capabilities that we've been seeing here at the Hive for almost 2 years now, and that's continuously developing, but it also varies by OEM. And the ability of those devices to do what they do varies depending on which OEM you're working with. And as a result, your experience, depending on what you have installed in which room, is going to be a little bit different. Then you have platform AI, in this case, the platform being Teams. That's what underpins all of our meetings, and that's done in the cloud. And there's a great, rich roadmap of capabilities coming in the future, plus a lot of advanced capabilities right now. And that gives you consistency across the experience. And both of those two types of AI are done primarily in the meeting. That's what we experience in the meeting. And post-meeting, primarily post-meeting, you have Microsoft 365 Copilot. And that's where you can squeeze the maximum value out of the content that is ingested, that is created during the meeting. And so that's a different type of use of AI. And again, that's done in the cloud, and that includes the entire full 365 stack. So this talk today is going to be broken roughly into these three categories. There is some bleeding in between them, and so we'll acknowledge that when the time comes. But I want to kick things off with Sam talking about device AI.
Awesome. Yeah, Dave and I are excited to be here. We're going to talk a little bit about the devices that we have in our meeting rooms at Microsoft and the role that AI plays. It's when we think of AI in the meeting room itself, we're going to deviate a little bit from a lot of the Copilot experiences, the LLM, the deep language models, and think more of the experiences that we have from AI. And honestly, I mean, we've seen little flavors of AI for years now, right? When we think of our camera bars, some of the other noise cancellation technologies in our conference rooms. When we think of AI specifically on these devices and the experience in the room, I think cameras obviously come to mind first. It's the thing you experience, you notice it right away.
It started with a gallery view for us.
That's right.
That was magical when that first happened.
Exactly. And that was like, 6, 7, 8 years ago, some of the first flavors of AI, even intro that, like some of the Rally cameras doing the group framing.
Yeah.
We then saw features like active speaker tracking. I remember the first deployment we had in an exec room with the Eagle Eye Director 2 and how magical that seemed, where it magically, with 2 lenses, find the actual speaker and frame them really well in a large conference room. We have some execs today who are still desperately hanging on to their Eagle Eye Directors 2 because they love the experience so much. I think especially over the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen a lot of innovation in this space, specifically around some of the video experiences we have in the room. I think this slide is great. When you walk through the Hive, I think we've got every one of these bars set up in the Hive, plus more. A lot of our OEM partners, this is a very popular segment, the all-in-one bars. They make up their staple in a lot of our conference rooms. The all-in-one devices with camera really captures pretty much all of our small, even some of our medium conference room designs, which makes up 60-70% of our room portfolio here at Microsoft. Right. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit just kind of how some of the different OEMs are approaching camera settings and how we manage that at Microsoft, some of the different features? We talked about group frame, active speaker, tracking, some of the television. It's just like, one thing that's confusing for me when we think about it is, it's not necessarily the same across all the devices, right? This is an OEM controlled experience.
So no, great point. Partner that we use quite a bit, Jabra, their P50 cam has been pretty exceptional in the area of, the individual person framing. You can see it here in this meeting. We are individually framed. They do a great job at moving to, let's say, even the next level of framing, which will provide, our own individual frames and individual streams. I mean, they really do push the envelope on that. And the rest of the companies as well. I mean, they're progressing quite a bit in that same area. Link surprisingly also does the same features. They do individual framing, maybe not to the robust nature of all of the AI features, but the camera behavior, the tracking. As you see, I move around a little bit. It will adjust to center me in my own frame. It's not trying to do something too crazy there, but just giving the presence for everybody in the room. We see Poly, their new bar, does the same features. Logi has their bar has been around a while. We've seen the progression of their intelligence, starting with group frame, then active speaker, and now they're doing the individual framing too, with the integration of multicam. So lots of great features in each of these companies.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's kind of what's interesting at the Hive. We get a chance, we see all these bars, we do a lot of certification testing here. We see the unique approach that every OEM is taking, right? They've got different layouts, they've got different approaches to framing. Sometimes we've got grid view, sometimes it's more of an accordion style. They're all kind of trying to figure out what's working, and it's a really cool experience to see. That's at the bar level. I think before we go to the next slide, I'm going to call out, like, a really, this is great when you have an opportunity to do an upgrade in your room, right? Getting the latest bar with the latest AI and features, and that's awesome. The other flavor of that AI that we see is actually most powerful at Microsoft. We've got such a large room portfolio. I can't even imagine what the percentage of, like, meetups and rally PTZ cameras that might have a simple framing, but then with the power of Teams, they're doing some of these types of more intelligent views on the cloud. So we're taking an older legacy room that maybe have another year, 2 years left before it's part of a refresh cycle, but we're still able to elevate that hybrid experience with a cloud type experience.
Yeah, this is why it's useful to distinguish between AI features that are layered on in cloud versus at the device, because sometimes, as you said, we've got how many thousands of rally cams out there, right? Just basic PTZ cameras. We're not going to go and replace them all. And so having that cloud layer of AI that Kyle is going to talk about a little bit later on in the presentation, having that is a really effective way to bring a consistent experience into those rooms.
This is another flavor. So this is another single device in the room, just another touch on the single device camera experience and the innovations that we're seeing especially with this device. This is one of the first products we have deployed at Microsoft. They're part of pilots that we're doing. We've got a couple of rooms that have really great experiences where they're essentially taking all the cool features. Again, Kyle, I'm not going to steal your thunder. They're doing things like, they've got all of the next gen, right? They've got multi-stream video, they've got biometric identification for employees who have been enrolled. They've got voice attribution. This is really kind of pushing the limits of what we're seeing from, like, what's the next gen coming. Again, single device in a room. Now, if we go to the next slide, I think this is where it then becomes a little bit more interesting as well. We're seeing a lot more innovation from our OEM partners in this space. This is where we're starting to introduce multiple cameras in a room and how those are that experience that we can deliver. In a room that we're in now, a signature room, a single lens at the front of the room is a great experience. We're all positioned in a way I can talk to you guys easily. I've got a great view of the front room. This is excellent. But in some of our traditional room layouts, where you've got these long room layouts, long tables, it's a really tough ask on a single camera in the front of a room to try to frame and find everyone in that room and get a good experience. And this, what we're seeing, we're really excited about some of these add-ons. Sometimes a room that already just had a single camera in the front, we could drop in one of these cameras in the room. Sometimes they're paired together where there's intelligence, there's an AI director that's helping produce the best view. They're mixing views together. They're finding the active speaker, giving room overviews. This is really excellent. I think, Dave, can you just, we had the Logi site and they're GA'd. Do you know of any other? I think we've got, I'm trying to remember.
We've also, for multicam, like drop-in solution?
Yeah, like so we're seeing the trend of like the front of room bar and then the center room table. So I know Neat, we're deploying Neat pilots with their setup. They've got a center room camera.
Yeah, on the Android side, the Link is doing a similar type of solution, front of room bar with
and I think Poly just announced theirs.
Poly just announced theirs.
So
Yeah,
we're definitely seeing an interesting trend. Opportunities like daisy chaining cameras together, I think, is going to be even more powerful for those larger room types. So that's another exciting segment. This is a good leeway into the next category of multi-cameras that we're starting to experience.
Actually, I wanted to say one thing about that accessory. The thermos bottle in the middle of the table form factor seems to be a thing that's sticking in the industry. It started with Logi. But one thing I just want to point out here for the audience is that is not the only device. Certainly in Logi's case and in Poly's case, these are two devices, one at the front of the room and one at the center of the table, that are working together. And if you think about the way that the video has to be juggled between those, this is now where you're starting to go from basic functions such as auto framing and gallery to a virtual director having to be layered on to figure out who is going to be viewed from which camera at which time. And there's some pretty cool capabilities right now. There's more in roadmaps that we're seeing. But even something like, if you look at the top image there and you see those 4 people arrayed in those vertical columns, that's from the center of table device, and it actually keeps people in the correct order that they exist in the room. And that seems like a little thing, but when you glance sideways at somebody in real life and it reverses it for the remote audience, it's awkward. It's kind of a record scratch.
Especially when people are talking to each other and they're looking in completely opposite directions. It's very confusing.
Exactly. So I wanted to just put an exclamation point on how much further we've gotten, even at edge compute devices like this.
Yeah. And Matthew, it's a great call out. Like today, a lot of the intro MVP experiences that we're seeing, right? It's a similar layout. That's the Logi site experience in the top corner where they're doing a nice job framing participants, and then they've got maybe it's a picture-in-picture window or a designated frame for the room overview. Yeah. I'm really excited when they're going to start layering a little bit more of that AI intelligence. Things like, depending on which direction I'm looking at, they can choose which camera has the best view of my face.
That's right. The virtual director.
Those virtual director experiences. We're really excited to see how that's going to light up in the room. Cool. Let's move to the next slide. And then we've got the multi-camera with the front of room bar, kind of that inside out view coming from the center of the table and out. There's also another category of multiple more traditional cameras where you can put them throughout the room and have them deployed. So something like the Hudley Crew is a very recent team certified solution. Today, their experience is 3 front of room cameras. You can see from this layout how it can, by spreading out that field of view across 3 cameras, you can get great cross shots across the table. Part of their roadmap is also very exciting in that today they'll support 3. They're looking at supporting multiple, so you can have a couple more extra devices throughout the room. Maybe you have some on side walls from the back of the room as well. What I think is particularly exciting about this approach, Yealink also has a similar solution as well, where it's multiple cameras in the room. But what's particularly awesome about the Hudley, we think, is the ability that there's no setup required. You're installing the cameras, and they're really relying on all of their AI capability, Copilot, not their Copilot, their AI director experience to really manage the experience in the room. That's great when you're thinking about deployments at scale, supportability. Yep. You can install them, and in theory, they just work.
I love that you brought that up, because one of the hidden features of a lot of this technology is at the install and the maintenance level. I think, David, you're going to talk a little bit more about how that shows up in audio. But when we think about AI, we're talking largely from a meeting experience standpoint here, but setup is part of the total cost of ownership. Yeah. And it can be significant. Even when you start to distinguish between inside center of table out versus outside in, you have integration costs to think about. You have to balance all that out, and the time for a technician to be in a room to set something up, especially at scale, adds up quickly.
Absolutely. I think that's a good segue. Like, as much as we love that ease of deployment for a solution like this, you're really then relying on the OEM manufacturer to build the experience. There are They have a couple of knobs, right? They have a couple of settings that you can control if you want a group view or more collaborative view or active speaker view, but you're really relying on the OEM to power that experience. And our next slide, the next category of multi-camera solutions. Dave, I'd love for you to give us a little bit of an overview on, instead of relying on some of the AI, these are much more powerful in terms of control. There are a lot more settings, but if you could talk a little bit more about kind of, I think these are fit into the Crushtron One Beyond solutions. QSC Seer Vision kind of falls under this maybe higher end, more complex solution.
Yeah, so these systems are very powerful. They're great. We obviously have them here at Microsoft.
In our highest end rooms.
Yeah, they're highest end rooms, highest end rooms. But they do a great job at sort of dividing out the room in function, right? We have very specific AI tracking cams for, let's say, a designated presenter area, which is, overlaid into a very complex zone system that is looking at where audio is coming from, and with features that, such as Crestron just introduced, which is, doing AI tracking for that zone and centering on the actual speaker.
Their visual AI.
Yeah, visual AI. These features are very nice. It does simplify even these type of rooms for their setup. If you've ever gone through the experience, it can take days or a week to set up a traditional one. And with the integration of AI, to your previous comment, it does simplify even that. We can target just specific zones, let the camera do all the legwork on where people are, and still get the benefits of the integration of both a standard PTZ camera in, let's say, in the whiteboard presentation area, but get the individual hybrid experience in a seated environment.
There's a lot more work up front to build those systems out.
Oh, yeah.
There's programming, there's calibration, there's tuning. But at the end, when we think about our boardroom and some of our executive spaces that have these solutions, we still rely on a simplified experience in the room. To start the meeting, it's still a one-touch join. You can start the meeting. You don't have to worry about, when you're in the meeting, controlling cameras. A lot of the work that we're doing up front is to make it so that, they work seamlessly in the room without you having to think too much. We don't have a control panel with the person controlling cameras and directing it, but it still requires that upfront work.
Yeah, and simplified, one PTZ camera added into a presentation environment like a multi-purpose room or a larger space is a great addition. Not too much lift. Single cameras are really capable of doing that now. But then looking at the more complex system, larger integrations, specific type of experiences, it's all at your fingertips really with these type of systems.
Awesome. I think we just nailed our time.
Yep.
I think this is a great transition. So we talked a little bit about the in-room experiences, what some of our OEMs are doing, the different flavors of technology in the room. But I'm really excited to introduce Kyle from the Teams product group, the engineering team. Kyle, take it away. He's going to go in depth on how all of what we've talked about really surfaces and the Teams roadmap on kind of making sense of all these different options.
Hey, thanks, Sam, Matthew, and David. It's a great overview of what our OEM has to offer and how we're deploying those at Microsoft. Yeah, it's a great session. I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of the platform side that Matthew had talked about, and how we think about AI from a Teams perspective, and then from a Teams Rooms client perspective as well. For Teams, we've integrated AI into our Teams ecosystem, from very early on, in many different areas, and it's taken up a lot of steam around the generative AI and the large language models. But from a video and audio perspective, we've really integrated these things into Teams with regards to audio quality, improving audio quality in the Teams meetings, noise suppression. Even intelligent video adjustments. When you join a Teams meeting and you see cropping that's happening for remote participants, that's because of AI in our systems that we're doing some face detection in our media pipeline, and we know kind of where the position of that head is, and we can crop those videos. And so, when we talk about AI in Teams, it's something that we've invested in, a lot over time. Next, I'll talk, what's kind of the next version for Teams? What are things that we're bringing from a Teams perspective? Intelligent Recap is really kind of the next wave and how that fits into Copilot enablement post-meeting, and how we kind of merge into the M365 Copilot version that Matt had talked about as well. And then another area is live translations and meeting captions. Again, that's where we're taking the natural language and doing that translation on the back end to provide that extra functionality for all users in meetings. From an in-room experience, a lot of these we've launched over the years. Spatial audio for our front row interface uses AI to provide that positioning of where people are positioned on the front row and where their audio should come from. The video gallery segmentation that we offer on front row, does that segmentation for each of those videos. And then, of course, AI noise suppression. We've leveraged what we released on the Teams desktop client and brought that into Rooms as well for Teams Rooms on Windows. And then even going back, a few years, things like our content camera technology, where we do this. We used to call it Magic Whiteboard, where you can deploy a camera in a room and have this great experience looking at a physical whiteboard, where we do ink detection and these type of things. So these are all just examples that we've released over the years in Rooms where we continue to use AI and where we're going to continue developing these great experiences. So I will talk a little bit about how we're going to be merging Rooms into the meeting recap and how we can take advantage of Microsoft 365 Copilot. And there's a couple ways we can do this. One is with our IntelliFrame technology, and then the other is with voice and face identity. First, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about IntelliFrame. We have two different versions of IntelliFrame. We have Cloud IntelliFrame, which either Sam or Matthew were referring to, where for legacy devices that don't have the most recent up-to-date cameras, we'll do the segmentation work on our services and our cloud services to bring a better hybrid meeting experience from the room. And so, instead of trying to zoom in on the 10 small little people in one full room view, we'll do that cropping and zooming on our service to provide that value to the majority of our rooms. And then we're also working with our partners to build what we call multi-stream IntelliFrame, and beyond that is intelligent camera. And when we talk about a team-certified intelligent camera, there's really two things. One is the multi-stream IntelliFrame technology, and then also something we call Face Stream, which brings face identity to the room. We have one device out now, which is the Yealink Smart Vision 60, which Sam was referring to earlier, kind of as the next gen AI device. And we're working with multiple OEMs to proliferate some more Teams intelligent cameras in the market, throughout this year. So stay tuned for announcements at upcoming events, AV events, for additional partners that will be onboarded into Teams intelligent camera. Then the next really important thing for integration with meeting recap and meeting Copilot is this voice identity. Right now with Rooms, if you think about, what does Copilot feed off of in meetings? It feeds off of the transcript that's created during a meeting. And so Rooms today, if they do not have any type of this technology, everyone that's sitting in that room will be attributed to the room identity, because each of those rooms have an AID identity in M365. And so when you go back and look at post-meeting and go look at meeting notes, and you use Copilot to try to determine who said what, all of the action items and things that got attributed to a room will be attributed to a room, and that's what Copilot will feed out. So it's very important that we bring this both speaker and face identity into the room space to play into the value that Copilot offers. And there's two ways we're doing that. There's one, we offer something called an intelligent speaker today. We've had that out for about a year and a half, and there's a few OEMs that provide intelligent speakers. The Yealink Smart Vision 60 that Sam had referred to earlier, that has the intelligent speaker built in along with the Teams intelligent camera. But for those devices, they will be able to do that in-room attribution. And then there's another feature that we announced at Ignite, and we kind of re-announced at EC as well, where we're trying to bring kind of a cloud service attribution for all legacy devices. So regardless of whether you have an intelligent speaker, for most rooms, you'll be able to do that attribution with what we call a single channel input, right? A single channel microphone input. And that will be launching pretty soon. Again, go back to kind of our EC announcements for more details around that availability. But once we have that technology, there's a couple things that admins would need to do. One is they would need to ensure that they allow enrollment to take place within Teams. So each user has the ability to opt into enrollment, but an admin first has to set a policy within their Teams ecosystem to enable enrollment from the first place. So enrollment is default off, so it's going to take an admin action to enable that. Then a user goes into their team settings and they'll find a recognition tab within the setting where they can enroll their voice by reading a few different sentences. And then once they enroll their voice, they'll also be enroll their face with a very similar method as you would for like enrolling your face in Windows Hello or any type of face enrollment. Once that's done, then especially for voice recognition, once a meeting room joins the room, those users in that room that have enrolled will be attributed into the transcripts. And so now that room provides value into Copilot as well, where you can distinguish those particular people in the room and action items in the room. And if you were in the room, you can go back to your Copilot and ask, like, from this meeting, what actions did I have? And it will attribute those to yourself. Now with attribution, there are still admin policies that need to be configured, and that is default off for rooms as well. And there's 3 settings. There's off, there's a setting we call distinguish, and there's another setting for that policy called attribute. Attributes, obviously, when someone's enrolled, they will be attributed to the transcript. If you have a room set up for distinguish, we won't do that attribution to an AAD identity in the room, but we will distinguish between separate speakers in the room. So if you're concerned and you want to roll this out gradually and you're concerned about the attribution portion of the room, distinguish still does offer value because in the transcript we'll be able to differentiate between speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. And so that helps get part of the way to the Copilot story post-meeting where you can distinguish between individual speakers. And then in the transcript, you can actually go back in and edit. If you can identify who speaker 2 was, you can manually post-meeting edit who speaker 2 was in the transcript. The next thing I'll talk about is face recognition. And face recognition right now brings a couple of different values. One is it provides an identity of everyone that's in the room that's enrolled in the roster. And so as a remote participant, I can look at the roster and I can see everyone that's identified in that room. And if someone hasn't enrolled, they'll still be identified as participant 1 or participant 2. So it'll keep account of how many people are in that room. And then also we'll provide name labels on the individual streams. And for intelligent cameras that do the face stream, this is where multi-stream IntelliFrame comes into play, where we provide both a full room view and also individual speaker views that provide up to 4 of the last speakers from that room. So there's a lot of visual value, and from a remote participant, being able to identify in the room is a lot of value from a face detection standpoint. Now you're thinking from our shift experience today, a room shows up in Teams as any remote participant does. And we've thought about this as well because you want to bring more visual capacity to the remote side when you're thinking about a room. And so with the new Teams desktop, we'll be rolling out in the next few months, a new gallery experience where rooms will actually be allocated additional space on the stage. And so when a room joins a meeting, they'll be allocated 4x the amount of area as a remote participant. And so when we bring technologies like cloud IntelliFrame and multi-stream IntelliFrame from the room, you get a really rich view as a remote participant. This cloud IntelliFrame view is the one on the top right, and the multi-stream IntelliFrame view is on the bottom right. But again, it kind of brings you closer to the action of what's happening in the room and be able to follow the conversation and activity in the room a bit better. Now, this next technology is something we announced at EC, and kind of going back to what David, Sam, and Matt were discussing was around, how do we work between what our partners are doing on the edge, and then what can Microsoft provide, and what can we add value in the room as well. And our partners are really great at coming up with these new technologies around face detection, speaker tracking, all of these different types of things. But they need to work within their own system, right? Their closed system. They don't have any information from the Teams meeting or from Microsoft on kind of what's happening in the meeting. And so this next thing is for Microsoft, we can take all of those different signals that come into a room, whether it be from our OEM systems or whether it be a user that joins from their laptop in a room and turns on their video. We know that identity signal, and we know that video signal. And so we thought of this first iteration of something that we'll be launching in the next few months where we can utilize that. So I'd like to play a short video. If the audio doesn't work, apologies. There are some captions in the video that you'll be able to follow along. That's just one example of how we're using AI on the edge to do kind of what we can do as Microsoft of analyzing all of those different signals that we're getting from the meeting room and providing a great experience for remote users. And it's in conjunction with our OEM partners. A lot of the devices that are doing these front of room camera plus an accessory center of room camera device, will bring their own automatic switching for the best view of that participant. But we'll rely on our OEMs in their system provide us the best view. And if a user brings their laptop into the room and we decide that that's better than what our OEMs are providing, we'll do that automatic switching. So again, just a way that we're thinking about innovations at Microsoft and how we can leverage all of those data signals from the room to provide a great hybrid experience. Another area we thought about internally is, how do we address these multi-purpose room spaces or, education type of spaces where there's a lecturer and an audience? A lot of our OEM systems provide functionalities. I know, David, you had mentioned like QSys, the Seer Vision. We have Crestron One Beyond, where they provide, these advanced setups for these types of spaces. But at Microsoft, we thought about, okay, how can we bring these to more markets, right? And then eventually, how do we work with our OEMs to bring these types of views to our remote Teams users? So what we're announced at EC and what I'll talk about today is a new view coming to the Teams desktop client called multiple camera view. And this will provide remote users where they can see up to 4 camera feeds simultaneously and be able to control the experience from their end of what they want to see. And again, this will still have full admin control. And so the admins will be able to determine, what cameras are allowed to be shown in multi-camera view. And even users in the room from the center side would be able to configure what cameras that they want active for a particular meeting. So on this next slide just kind of shows an example of, a boardroom where we have 3 cameras configured. And again, these cameras, they don't need to be intelligent because we're trying to do all the intelligence in the cloud. And so we'll be able to stream all 3 of those feeds to a single frame from that room and provide the user controls to determine, what view they want to see at a given time. And then eventually we'll start advancing this technology where we'll bring more intelligence into this from a cloud service as well. And so the user can choose some type of automatic mode where it'll just intelligently switch between those different views. This next slide is another example of kind of that lecturer type of audience type of configuration, where again, it's just 2 cameras deployed in the room, but as a remote user, you can easily follow along in the conversation and focus on the areas that you want to focus on. And so I think from a Teams Rooms perspective, one of the things that we think about as product managers a lot is what is that remote experience going to be like, right? When you think about deploying devices in a room, what you're deploying those devices for are really the remote experience, right? From the remote side. And that remote side could be another Teams room. It could be a mobile client. It could be a desktop client. Many different types of clients. But what you deploy in the room is really important, and how you set that equipment up is how that space is going to be viewed on the remote side of things. And so, as I said, from a product point of view, we're constantly trying to think of gaps that we may have on different clients, gaps in experience for different room archetypes, and what experiences that we can bring to the remote user to add value. All of our OEMs are building AI directly into the hardware. And so we are working with them to determine how do we integrate best with their work. From a Microsoft point of view, we want to be able to have a common interface for them to communicate with us on Teams meetings. So we provide a consistent view from a room into the Teams meetings. So my suggestion would be to reach out to each OEM partner, and they potentially can provide some details on when they will be bringing their technology into kind of this Microsoft ecosystem of Teams intelligent cameras. But again, all of our major certified OEMs for Teams certified cameras in the rooms, we're discussing and talking with all of those to bring them into the Teams certified intelligent camera space.
We talked a lot about AI and devices and all that, but one thing we haven't covered yet is management. So even without AI-powered devices and all that, at the end of the day, you still need to manage the devices. So how have we at Microsoft thought about bringing AI capabilities to the management experience? So obviously, you've probably heard of things like M365 Copilot and Security Copilot, which recently went GA. Those are just good examples of things to come, right? But things that already exist, right, especially with respect to the context of Teams Rooms, today you have the option of using the Teams Rooms Pro Management Portal, which is what we see as a comprehensive management portal, or the single pane of glass used for managing these types of rooms. For some time now, we've actually implemented AI into that portal so that it can help drive a lot of the management experiences. For example, alerting and automatic remediations. So there's a lot of intelligence that we've built into the management platform that helps detect issues on your devices, on the Teams room specifically, and depending on the information, our backend will make decisions as to what remediation to apply, right, to try to self-heal these devices. And so that's just from the management side, how we think about how artificial intelligence, which, by the way, is a very broad term, right, can cover anything from just simple machine learning algorithms all the way up to large language models and such. So that do remember that AI is a very broad, all-encompassing term for a lot of these, intelligent capabilities. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover there. And I think that's effectively in a nutshell what we provide on the management side and how it relates to artificial intelligence capabilities.